everyone, welcome to the I Am Noah channel. This time, I will tell you a story about Numa, the sacred king of early Rome. Find the most comfortable position for you right now. You can sit in a chair with your back straight, but still relaxed, or lie down comfortably. If you like this video, please push like button and subscribe this channel. Prologue. The silence after the storm Rome stood. The city carved from wolf blood and vengeance, built with sword and fire, now cast its long shadow across the 7 hills. But its king was gone. Romulus, the founder, the warrior, the wolfborn, had vanished into the storm taken by the gods. So they said. Some whispered of murder, others of miracles. The truth was buried beneath years and myth. Now the throne sat empty, and the city he left behind was powerful but restless. The warriors who had followed him, men hardened by exile and battle, feared no enemy, but they feared disorder. Senators argued, factions formed, Sabines and Romans eyed each other with suspicion. The peace Romulus had forged with blood and marriages threatened to unravel. There were no laws, only decrees, no priests, only omens, no calendar, only the chaos of seasons and war. The people cried out, not for a conqueror, but for something Rome had never known, a king of peace, a king of wisdom, a king who could speak to gods, not with steel, but with silence. Far from the Palatine Hill, beyond the Tiber and into the Sabine countryside, there lived a man named Numa Pompilius. He did not seek power. He did not crave glory. He lived quietly, studying the stars and walking the sacred groves. But fate, once again, turned its eyes from war to wonder, and from the ashes of Rome's founding fire. The gods would now choose a lawgiver, not to build walls, but to shape souls. Chapter 1. The man from Curzin, the quiet Sabine town of Cures. Nestled in the hills east of the Tiber, life moved with the rhythm of the earth knot, the beat of drums, or the clatter of swords dot here. The fields grew green and generous, the rivers ran slow and clear, and among the olive trees and sacred groves walked a man named Numa Pompilius. He was no general, no raider, no hero sung in battle songs, but he was known. People said he could read the skies, understand the language of birds, speak wisely with old men and softly with children. He rose before the sun and offered prayers, not for victory, but for balance. Numa was born into a noble Sabine family descended, they said, from Tatius, the late co-king of Rome. But he shunned the city, preferring the calm of nature and the council of sages. He studied the ways of the Etruscans, the rituals of the Latins, the old chants of the forest gods, and he listened. More than anything, Numa listened. One morning, as he walked the grove near the temple of Vacuna for Roman envoys arrived from the west. Their tunics were dusty, their sandals worn, but their bearing was unmistakably official. Numa one asked. He turned from the trees. Yes, we come from the Roman Senate. The people have chosen a king, and that king is you. Numa stared at them, not with shock, but with sadness. You want a king of peace to rule a city of war. Rome is changing, the envoy replied. Romulus gave us power. You must give us purpose. But Numa shook his head. The gods choose kings, not men, and I am no king. He returned to his grove. The Romans left without ceremony, but they did not return alone. Over the next few days, delegations arrived from Sabine and Roman lands alike. Priests, elders, and even soldiers came to Cures, pleading for him to accept. Only you can unite us, they said. You carry the blood of kings and the spirit of the gods. If you do not take the throne, we will fall back into blood and fire. Still, Numa hesitated until one night, as the moon rose over the grove, a great owl flew overhead and landed on the altar stone, something never before seen in that place. It hooted once, then turned to the east toward Rome. The next morning, Numa stood before his people. If I am to rule, I will not do it as a warrior. I will not expand the city through war or deceit. I will not take the throne by force or inheritance. I will rule only if the gods declare it so. Let us climb the sacred hill and ask them. And so Numa Pompilius set off for Rome, not with an army behind him, but with faith before him. He would not fight for the crown. He would earn it from the skies. Chapter 2. Reluctant crown. The path to Rome was long, but Numa did not hurry. As he crossed the river and approached the city's rising walls, he saw the scars of conquest still fresh. Fields burned from old raids, huts rebuilt from ash, temples half finished in marble and blood. Rome was powerful, yes, but it was a city unfinished in spirit. It had grown under Romulus, like a flame hot, fast and wild. Now it needed shape, and Numa, if he was to accept its crown, would shape it not with iron but with ritual. The Roman Senate had gathered at dawn atop the Capitoline Hill. The sun rose behind them, casting long shadows down the forum. Senators in white togas murmured and watched. The man in simple robes approached not with guards, but with a staff of olive wood in hand. He bowed. "You seek a king," he said, "but I seek the gods." The Senate, wary of priests and philosophers, turned to their chief augur, a man named Atus Navius. "Then let the gods decide," said Atus. "If the signs are favorable, the crown is yours." Numa agreed. A sacred ritual was prepared. They led him up the Aventine Hill, where the air was thin and still. There, they built a templeless altar, and the augur stood beside him, holding a crooked staff. The Lichuas used to read the sky. They marked a square in the heavens. The Templarman waited for hours. Nothing. Then suddenly, a single eagle appeared in the east. Soaring high, it circled above Numa 3 times, then vanished into the clouds. Atus turned to the Senate, his voice solemn. "The gods have spoken. The king is chosen, and Rome shall know peace." The city exhaled. Numa Pompilius, son of Cures, philosopher of the hills, was crowned king of Rome. But there was no feast, no parade, no sword raised in triumph. Instead, Numa spoke quietly to the crowd. "I will not lead you into battle. I will not seize new lands. I will give you something greater order. You must learn to live not just as warriors, but as a people watched by the gods." Some scoffed, others bowed, but all listened, because Rome had never heard a king speak like that night. Numa did not sleep in the palace of Romulus. He walked the outskirts of the city, touching the stones of unfinished temples, placing his hand in the river that once carried 2 infants to fate. He knelt before the flame of Vesta and whispered a silent promise. He would not be Rome's second king. He would be its first priest. Chapter 3. The pact with the gods. The crown sat light on Numa's head, because it was never his burden to carry alone. He believed that kingship was not a right, but a responsibility given by the gods and measured daily by one's piety, wisdom, and restraint. And so, his first act as king was not to raise an army or build a wall. It was to bind Rome to the divine. In the earliest days of his reign, Numa withdrew to a small grove near the Janiculum Hill. There, beneath oak and laurel trees, he fasted, meditated, and prayed not for power, but for clarity. He emerged days later with a vision and a plan. Rome would not be ruled by men alone. It would be shaped by ritual, rhythm, and reverence. Every ACT, public or private, would echo with sacred purpose. We must learn, he told the Senate, to walk with the gods beside us, not behind us. Numa began his reforms by creating the Roman calendar. Until then, Romans counted time by moons and war seasons. But Numa divided the year into 12 lunar months, aligning it with nature and divine cycles. He named sacred days, feast days, and days of rest. He taught the people when not to fight, just as much as when to sow or harvest. With this rhythm, Rome breathed. Next, he turned to the sacred offices. Numa established the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, guardian of ritual, law, and divine custom, though others would wear the title. He was its first true bearer. He created priesthoods for Mars, Jupiter, and Quirinus, the divine form of Romulus, uniting the old war spirit of Rome with his new vision of peace. He appointed the Vestal Virgins to tend the eternal flame of Vesta, goddess of hearth and home. The fire would never be allowed to die as long as Rome lived. So would the flame. But not all worship required temples. In a quiet grove near the Porta Capena, Numa began to spend his nights in solitude. The guards whispered that he spoke with a nymph, a divine spirit who lived in the sacred spring nearby. Her name was Egeria. Some said she appeared to him in mist and moonlight, with eyes like still water and a voice like wind through pine. She counseled him in dreams. She taught him forgotten rites. She showed him how to bind the will of gods to the needs of people. If Romulus was father of the city, Numa once said, then Egeria is the mother of its soul. The people began to change. They still trained for war, but now they fasted and prayed. They still honored Mars, but they bowed also to Janus, god of beginnings and transitions. Numa built a temple to Janus in the heart of the city. Its doors were to remain open in times of war and closed in times of peace for 40 years. Under Numa's rule, the doors stayed closed. Rome had never known such peace. He did not conquer land. He conquered the heart of a restless city, and by teaching it reverence, he made Rome stronger than any sword ever could. Chapter 4. The Sacred Reforms. Rome, once wild and untamed, now moved to the slow rhythm of ritual. Under Numa, every corner of Roman life was touched by the sacred. The people began to see not only gods in the sky, but the divine in daily acts, in the tilling of soil, the lighting of lamps, the silence of dawn. But to preserve this sacred balance, structure was needed, so Numa began the work that would define his reign, not with a sword or crown, but with law, right, and rhythm. The priesthoods of Numa appointed the first, Flaмен's high priests to the three major gods of early Rome. Flamen Dialis, for Jupiter, king of the gods. Flamen Martialis, for Mars, god of war. Flamen Quirinalis, for Quirinus, the deified. Romulus, each priest, lived under strict rules. They could not ride horses, touch metal, or even sleep outside their own bed. They were living symbols of divine law. Numa taught that priests were not rulers, but mediators, servants of harmony between mortals and immortals. The eternal Flamen, the Forum. A round temple rose, the temple of Vesta. Within it, a sacred flame burned day and night, watched over by 6 Vestal Virgins, chosen as children. They served for 30 years, living apart from men, untouched by the world of politics and desire. To Numa, this flame was more than fire. It was Rome itself. If it ever went out, it would mean that the gods had turned away. No city stands by force alone, Numa taught. It stands when it honors what cannot be seen, the Fetiel's guardians of peace, to restrain Rome's thirst for expansion. Numa created a body of official priest-keepers of diplomatic rights. Before war could be declared, these priests had to make formal offerings and declarations to the gods and the enemy. If the enemy did not answer the challenge, then and only then could war be considered just. It was the beginning of a Roman idea that would last for centuries. Even war must serve law. The temple of Geno's Numa built a temple with 2 open gates, one facing east, one west. This was the temple of Janus, god of beginnings, gates, and transitions. When Rome is at war, Numa declared, the doors will be open. When Rome is at peace, they shall be shut. And under Numa, for 40 years, the doors remained closed. Even enemies marveled. Rome, for once, had no need to conquer it, had learned to belong. The people grew, not just in number, but in spirit. They began to believe that what held them together was not only law or might, but a shared reverence for something greater. Numa did not banish Rome's warlike spirit, he tempered it. He took the fire Romulus had lit and placed it in sacred vessels, where it could warm rather than burn. And slowly, the city changed, from a camp of warriors into a nation of order, from scattered tribes into a people with souls. Chapter 5. Egeria. Even the most grounded men have places they do not speak of. For Numa, that place was the sacred grove beyond the city walls, where the trees whispered like priests and the water in the spring never stilled. There, beneath moonlight and laurel, he met with Egeria. Some said she was a nymph, a daughter of Diana, born of mist and divine earth. Others claimed she was a spirit of the spring, old as the hills, who chose Numa as her companion. And some whispered she was no more than a dream wisdom given form by longing. But Numa never denied her. She counsels me, he once told the Senate, in silence and in stars. Every night he would walk alone to the grove, beneath no guard or torch. He would sit beside the spring, eyes closed, lips moving without sound. And in the morning he would return with new laws, new rituals, new insight. The people began to call it the Book of Egeria, living scroll whispered from the divine into human ears. From these whispered revelations came Rome's moral codes, not enforced by sword, but by ritual, rhythm, and fear of the divine. A man who broke an oath would offer sacrifice, not gold. A child born on an unlucky day would wait before naming. No deal was struck. No field tilled, no battle joined, without first consulting the signs. Egeria taught Numa that Rome must be bound not just to gods above, but to nature, to season, to pattern. Life, she said, was not conquest, it was balance. Yet for all his wisdom, Numa kept the grove to himself. No one else heard Egeria voice. No one else heard Egeria voice. That one else saw the spirit in the moonlight. But they saw what she left behind. Temples in perfect alignment with stars. A calendar that danced with the solstices. A nation more disciplined, in peace, than it had ever been in war. In time, some grew uneasy. What if the king is mad? They asked. What if he worships shadows? What if no one speaks to him at all? But the Senate looked at the temples, the order, the peace, and fell silent. For who could argue with the results of a dream, if that dream brought 30 years without war? And who was to say that Rome's second founder had not been chosen, just like the first? At twilight, Numa would often kneel by the spring and ask the same question he asked from the beginning. Am I guiding them, or only listening well? The spring never answered, but it never ran dry. Chapter 6. The peaceful legacy. Numa Pompilius ruled for 43 years. No battles were fought, no borders were taken. And yet, when his reign ended, Rome was stronger than it had ever been. Not in conquest, but in the soul. He did not expand the walls of the city, but he expanded the hearts of its people. He taught them that the gods were not thunderbolts or fury, but ritual, order, truth, and timing. He gave Rome its calendar, its priesthood, its sacred laws. He laid the foundation for the religion that would guide emperors, senators, and soldiers for centuries. In his final years, Numa grew quiet again. The city buzzed with life, temples full, festivals grand, but the king spent more and more time in his sacred grove. He walked slower, he prayed longer, and one morning he simply did not return. They found him kneeling by the spring, eyes closed, his hand resting on a smooth stone, no fear on his face, only calm. The Senate mourned him. The people wept. They buried him not in the Forum, nor on the Capitoline, but on the Janiculum hill, far from the sound of swords beneath trees that whispered like old friends. And though he left no son, no dynasty, he left something greater, a Rome that knew how to endure. Years later, a storm revealed a stone chest hidden beneath his tomb. Inside were scrolls said to be the writings of Numa himself, some whispered, dictated by Egeria. They spoke of rituals, of prayers, of the gods' hidden names, but they were burned by decree of the priests too sacred or too dangerous for mortal eyes. The words were lost. The impact remained. Epilogue. From fire and silence, Rome was founded by two kings. One with the sword, one with the soul. Romulus gave Rome its breath. Numa gave it its heartbeat. And long after both were gone, when emperors claimed divine favor and legions marched under banners of thunder, it was Numa's laws, Numa's rituals, Numa's flame that still flickered in the shadows. His rule was not remembered in monuments, but in the invisible patterns that outlived them all.